You are standing in a room with two animals. On your left, you have a chimpanzee, our closest living genetic relative, an absolute evolutionary marvel who shares 98.8% of your DNA. On your right, you have a golden retriever named Barnaby, who just spent the last 5 minutes trying to eat a remarkably shiny rock.
Now, you take a delicious treat, and while neither of them is looking, you hide it under one of two identical plastic cups on a table. You step back, you look at both animals, and you clearly and deliberately point your finger directly at the cup holding the prize.
What happens next is one of the most fascinating paradoxes in the entire animal kingdom. The chimpanzee, an animal capable of learning sign language, doing complex math, and ripping the bumper off a car with its bare hands, will stare completely blankly at your finger. He has absolutely no idea what you are doing. But Barnaby the rock eater? Barnaby will trot right over to the exact cup you pointed at, flip it over, and eat the treat.
In this specific, highly crucial cognitive test, your goofy, perpetually distracted dog is vastly, objectively smarter than a chimpanzee. But why? How is it that a creature that occasionally gets stuck behind the sofa understands human intentions better than an ape with a brain built for complex problem solving? The answer involves thousands of years of evolution, a survival strategy based almost entirely on being a good boy, and a radical shift in how we understand animal intelligence.
To truly appreciate how insane this is, we first have to give the chimpanzee its due respect. When we talk about animal intelligence, chimpanzees are the gold standard, the undeniable heavyweights of the cognitive world. If there was a standardized test for animals, chimps would be in the Ivy League, and most other animals would be chewing on the number 2 pencils.
Chimps in the wild are natural engineers. They strip leaves off twigs to fish for termites, they use heavy stones as hammers to crack open hard nuts, and they even use crumpled leaves like a sponge to soak up drinking water from hard-to-reach tree hollows. They don't just use tools, they manufacture them. And their memories? Completely terrifying. In famous studies conducted at the Primate Research Institute in Japan, a chimpanzee named Ayumu was placed in front of a touchscreen. Numbers from 1 to 9 would flash on the screen in random positions for less than a quarter of a second before turning into white squares. Ayumu could reliably tap the white squares in the exact numerical order of the hidden numbers. If a human tries this, we fail miserably. Our brains physically cannot process and retain that spatial information that quickly. The chimp beats us at our own memory game without even breaking a sweat.
Chimps can also pass the mirror self-recognition test. If you put a mark on a chimp's face and put them in front of a mirror, they will look in the mirror and then touch their own face, proving they understand that the reflection is them. They have a sense of self, they understand complex social hierarchies, they form complex alliances to overthrow alpha males, and they mourn their dead. By all traditional metrics of intelligence, problem-solving, memory, tool use, and self-awareness, the chimpanzee is an absolute genius, which is exactly what makes the pointing test so utterly baffling. Let's go back to that room with the 2 cups. This experiment is known in cognitive psychology as the object choice task, pioneered by researchers who wanted to test something incredibly profound: cooperative communication. When you point at the cup with the food, you are not just making a random physical gesture. You are communicating a highly complex psychological concept. You are essentially saying to the animal, I know something that you don't know, and I want you to know it, so I am directing your attention to this specific location for your benefit. To understand pointing, an animal has to possess what psychologists call a theory of mind. They have to understand that you have your own separate mind with your own thoughts, knowledge, and intentions, and that you are actively trying to share information with them to help them out. When scientists run this test with adult chimpanzees, the chimps almost always fail. They look at the human's pointing finger, they might inspect the finger itself, or they might just guess randomly between the 2 cups. They do not naturally make the cognitive leap that the human's extended digit is a directional signpost meant to guide them to a reward. But dogs? Dogs pass this test with flying colors, and they don't just pass the standard pointing test. You can gaze at the correct cup, nod your head toward it, or even just place a wooden block on top of it as a marker. The dog will look at you, look at your signal, and immediately understand the assignment. Oh, my human is telling me the food is over there.
And here is the absolute kicker. You don't have to train a dog to do this. Scientists have tested puppies as young as 6 weeks old, puppies that have barely spent any time with humans and are still tripping over their own paws. Even these tiny, inexperienced puppies pass the pointing test. It is completely hardwired into their genetics. It is a biological intuition. Even wild wolves raised by humans from birth completely fail this test. So we have a massive evolutionary mystery. Why does the genius ape and the wild wolf fail while the seemingly less intelligent domestic dog succeeds? The answer lies in the fundamental difference between how these animals make a living in the wild. It comes down to evolutionary pressure and the drastically different environments in which their brains evolved. Chimpanzees live in highly complex, fiercely competitive social structures. In a chimp society, everyone is constantly vying for status, food, and mates. It is a world of shifting alliances, deception, and brutal political maneuvering. If you are a chimp in the jungle, the only reason another chimp would tell you where food is if they are trying to trick you while they steal the better food for themselves.
Because of this, chimpanzee intelligence evolved to be highly competitive, a concept scientists call Machiavellian intelligence. They are brilliant at figuring out what other individuals know, but they use that information to outsmart them, not to cooperate with them. The very idea that another species, a human, would freely offer them helpful information without a hidden selfish agenda just does not compute in the chimpanzee's deeply cynical, politically charged brain. To a chimp, a pointing finger isn't a helpful hint. It's just a weird thing a human is doing with their hand.
Dogs, on the other hand, went through an entirely different evolutionary crucible. They went through a process that radically rewired their brains, their bodies, and their social cognition: domestication.
But we need to clear up a massive historical misconception right now. Humans did not invent dogs by going into the woods, kidnapping wild wolf cubs, and teaching them how to fetch. That is a total myth. Early humans were nomadic hunter-gatherers struggling to survive the harsh realities of the Ice Age. They didn't have the time, the excess meat, or the patience to domesticate an aggressive wild apex predator. Instead, the leading scientific theory is that wolves domesticated themselves. Imagine a pack of wolves living near an early human encampment around 20 to 30,000 years ago. Humans are incredibly messy creatures. We leave behind scraps of meat, discarded bones, and waste. This garbage pile on the edge of the human camp was an absolute goldmine of easy, calorie-dense food for a hungry wolf.
But there was a major catch. To get to the garbage, a wolf had to be brave enough and remarkably calm enough to get close to humans without triggering our defensive instincts to throw a spear at them. The most aggressive, fearful, and reactive wolves would run away or get killed by humans. But the wolves with a natural genetic mutation for friendliness, the ones with a slightly lower fight or flight response, the ones who were a little less stressed by the presence of upright apes, they got to stick around. They ate the scraps.
Because they ate better, these friendly wolves survived longer and had more puppies, and those puppies inherited that specific friendly genetic trait. Generation after generation, nature was naturally selecting not for the biggest, not for the strongest, and not for the most vicious, but for the friendliest.
This biological process is called survival of the friendliest. As these wolves evolved to live closer and closer to humans, a magnificent shift occurred. The environment of these early proto-dogs was no longer the wild, unforgiving forest. Their environment was us. Humanity became their ecological niche.
If you think this sounds like a wild, unprovable theory, scientists have actually recreated this exact process in real time. In the 1950s, a Russian geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev started a legendary and ambitious experiment with wild silver foxes. He took a group of highly aggressive wild foxes and began breeding them with one strict, uncompromising rule. He only allowed the friendliest, least aggressive foxes to reproduce. He completely ignored their size, their coat color, or their physical strength. He bred solely and exclusively for tameness. Within just a few generations, something absolutely astonishing happened. The foxes didn't just become friendly, their physical appearances began to change drastically. Their stiff ears became floppy, their straight tails started to curl up, their coats developed patchy, cow-like colors, their faces became rounder with shorter snouts that looked much more like puppies. This collection of traits is known as domestication syndrome. When you select purely for friendliness and a reduction in aggression, you accidentally alter a network of genes linked to neural crest cells in the developing embryo, which randomly affects everything from ear cartilage development to adrenaline production. But here is the most important, jaw-dropping part of Belaev's experiment for our dog versus chimp showdown. These newly domesticated friendly foxes suddenly became incredibly skilled at reading human gestures. Just like dogs, these foxes intuitively started to understand human pointing. The wild foxes failed the pointing test miserably, but the domesticated foxes passed it, completely unprompted and without a single second of training. By breeding for tameness, you inadvertently breed for cooperative communication. Over tens of thousands of years, dogs evolved to pay intense, unbroken attention to humans because their literal survival depended on it. They became highly specialized in reading our faces, our body language, and our intentions.
Think about the physical anatomy of a dog's face. Dogs have actually evolved specialized facial muscles above their eyes that wild wolves simply do not have. The sole biological purpose of these extra muscles is to raise their inner eyebrows, creating that iconic, absolutely irresistible puppy dog eyes look. When they make this specific face, it perfectly mimics the facial expressions of human infants when they are sad or seeking attention. And it absolutely destroys our human brains. When a dog gives you that look, your brain releases a massive surge of oxytocin, the exact same powerful hormone responsible for maternal bonding between a mother and her baby. The dog looks at you, your oxytocin spikes, you feel overwhelmingly compelled to pet and feed the dog. And in return, the dog's oxytocin spikes too. Dogs have literally hijacked the biological mother-infant bonding loop of the human brain.
A chimpanzee doesn't need to read your eye movements to survive in the jungle. A wolf doesn't care what you are pointing at in the woods. But to a dog, you are the absolute center of the universe. You are the source of food, warmth, safety, and affection. From the exact moment they are born, their brains are hyper-tuned into the human frequency.
When you point at that cup on the table, the dog doesn't see a random, confusing hand gesture. The dog sees its human partner, its evolutionary teammate, offering a crucial piece of collaborative information. The dog implicitly trusts that you are trying to help. So, is your dog actually smarter than a chimpanzee?
Well, if you drop them both in the middle of a dense rainforest and ask them to build a termite fishing rod out of a twig, your dog is going to starve to death while happily wagging its tail at a tree stump. Intelligence is not a single linear sliding scale from dumb to smart. Intelligence is highly specialized. It is an evolutionary toolbox, and every animal evolves the exact specific tools it needs to survive in its specific environment.
The chimpanzee's toolbox is filled with complex spatial problem-solving skills, rapid-fire memory, and Machiavellian social calculus. It is a brain perfectly engineered for the ruthless, competitive world of the canopy. But the dog's toolbox is entirely different. The dog's primary survival tool is us. They traded raw, independent problem-solving skills for unparalleled social intelligence and interspecies cooperation. They learned that they don't need to know how to magically open the heavy wooden door as long as they know exactly how to convince a human to open it for them.
Dogs are not the Einsteins of the animal kingdom. They aren't going to do your taxes, write a novel, or build a rocket ship. But they are unparalleled, masterclass social geniuses. They are the only species on Earth that natively, intuitively speaks the physical language of human intention.
The next time you catch your dog spinning in chaotic circles, barking aggressively at its own reflection in the oven glass, or attempting to eat a heavily guarded piece of lint off the living room carpet, don't write him off as foolish. Beneath that goofy, clumsy, chaotic exterior is tens of thousands of years of specialized evolutionary brilliance. They might not be able to do flash memory math like a chimpanzee, but they understand you better than any other creature on this entire planet. And in the grand, unforgiving game of evolutionary survival, deciding to become humanity's best friend turned out to be the absolute smartest move ever made.